In this video, we're going to take a look at how we can combine apps for SharePoint with apps for Office. This can make for some very powerful scenarios. Say I had an expense report app for Office that I wanted to use to maybe interact with Word, have it maybe pull together a full expense report for me that I can submit. Well, if I was storing those in a document library, I would want a user to be able to just go up to the ribbon, say new expense report, and have it launch Word with my app for Office already installed. Well, that's something that we can deliver very easy using apps for SharePoint. So let's actually take a look at this. So I'm here in Visual Studio. I'm going to create a new project, and I'm going to start with an app for SharePoint. And what you'll see is that within an app for SharePoint, we can embed an app for Office. So I'll call this expense reporting and go ahead and say OK. Now it's going to ask me how I want to host this. I could really go with any of the hosting options. I could do provider hosted, auto hosted. For just simplicity's sake, I'm going to go with SharePoint hosted. I'm going to go ahead and click finish. So this is going to set up basically a blank app for SharePoint project for me that I can start adding my various solution assets to. One of the first things that we're going to see is that it gives me a start page. All of the apps for SharePoint give me a start page for the app. In this case, I really don't even need this. So I'm going to just go ahead and close this out. And we could actually delete it if we wanted to, because we're going to have a different start page, as we'll see here in a moment. So what I'm going to do is start adding some of our solution assets. So I'm going to right click the project and say add new item. This is going to bring up the dialog of all the different things that we can add to our app for SharePoint. Most of these are very familiar. So things like lists, I can add workflow, I could add a site column, a module, a client web part. All of these are traditional things that I would add to an app for SharePoint. But if you look at the very bottom, there's an option to add an app for Office. So this is what's going to allow me to embed my app for Office inside my app for SharePoint. So I'm going to call this expense report app and say OK. Now it's going to want to know what type of app for Office I'm creating. So I could do a task pane app, I could do a content app for Excel. In this case, I want to do a task pane app for Microsoft Word. So that's really what I'm going to focus on. If I click next, I have an option of specifying an existing document to use for this app for Office. So if I already had an expense report put together in a nice format in a Word document, I could go out and browse to that and use that, and it would attach the app automatically to it. My other option is just to start with a blank document. So it'll just give me a brand new document that has my app for Office already associated with it. So that's what I'm going to do. I'll just go with the blank one. Now when I do this add, it's going to add a number of different assets into this project. There's going to be a number of kind of user experience things that are added, like an HTML page which will host my app for Office, the UI. There will be a style sheet so that it looks nice. There's some scripts so that it can actually interact with the Word document. All of those things get added for me automatically. Some of the other things that are going to get added automatically are the app manifest for the app for Office. So all apps for Office, they always need to know what the start page is, and that's what that manifest ultimately provides. The other thing that I have here is there's an actual module that was added to my project. So you can see here, I actually have a module where a Word document was added. And that Word document is the document that has the app for Office attached to it. At this point, it's really just a blank Word document. If I were to go in here, you'll see that it's just a blank document, and then we have our app that's automatically been attached to it. Now, in this point, the app isn't being able to display, and that's just because we haven't deployed the web page that's going to be displayed there. So I'll go ahead and close out of this. We could make this look really nice if we wanted to, but for the sake of the demo, we'll just go with the default. All right. Next thing we need to do is we need to actually now create a library to store our expense reports. So what I'm going to do is go up to the project again and say add new item. And this time we're going to select a list, and I'm going to call this expense reports. When I say add, Visual Studio is going to want to know what type of list I'm creating. So I could by default go with like a blank list, but what I'm going to do is select document library. Now, it's very important that you don't go fast here. If I were just to click finish, I would skip a very important screen. So if I click next on this dialog, it's going to allow me to specify a template to use, a document template to use with this library. So if I were to just go with the default, it would just have the normal blank document. What I want to do is I want to associate that Word document that has our app already embedded in it. So what I'm going to do is select this option here to browse to my own template. I'm going to find that Word document. So it's right here. You can see there's the expense report app.docx. We'll go ahead and select that guy as our document template and say finish. Now, this is going to do a number of things. By saying that we want to use a specific document template, Visual Studio is going to know that it needs to create a content type for our expense report. So not only is it creating the list instance, it's actually going to create a content type. So that's what you're seeing. Well, you see it over here in the side navigation. I have an expense report content type. On this screen, you can see if I wanted to customize the library, I could do it. You can see here is where the content type or actually the document template association is specified. So all of this is great. We're really just about done. There's a few additional things we want to do. First of all, I want to make it a little bit friendlier when we go to create a expense report. So I'm going to just go in here to the schema XML. I'm going to give it a more friendly name of expense report and give it maybe a description as well that says maybe add or create a expense report. The last thing that we need to do is that when we launch the app, we need it to go somewhere. And as it stands right now, it's going to go to that default HTML page that was created when we first created the project. Now, we don't want that. We want it to go directly to our library. And that's very easy to fix. So what I want to do is go to the list instance. So you can see here in the navigation in the Solution Explorer, I have my list instance. And I want to go see what the URL of that's going to be. So here's my URL, and I want to actually make this be the start page for my app. And the place where I specify start page is in the manifest.xml file, the app manifest. So here's that app manifest.xml. I'm going to open this up, and you can see currently it is pointed to the default ASPX page of our app. And again, I don't want that. I want it to point out to this library, so I'm just going to paste that in here. And now we should have an app that's ready to go. So let's go ahead and click start, and this will deploy this out into our SharePoint site, and we should have the ability to create expense reports. Let's take a look. All right, so it looks like it's finished installing. Now it's going to actually take us into the start page of the app, which is our document library. So you see it took us directly to that expense reports library. Now, if we did everything right, when I go over to Files and I say Add New Document, I have an expense report option. So that's that expense report content type that was created. And when I launch this, what we should see in Word is that we'll get a blank expense report that has our app for Office already installed. So here it is. Here's our blank Word document, and you can see over our task pane app is loading. And in this case, we just went with the default task pane app where I can, type some test hello world. And I can actually talk into our Word document, and I can go the other way as well. So I'll say hello Richard. And if I say get data, you can see that it was able to pull that into our Office app. So hopefully you can see how this is a very powerful concept where we can combine these apps for SharePoint with apps for Office and do some really interesting things.